All right, so someone in my Discord asked if I could give like a breakdown, or someone could give a breakdown of how to solve this front-end Mentor IO challenge. If you haven't heard of this site, it's actually pretty cool if you want to practice your front-end skills. They have like a bunch of challenges, and they try to help you build out widgets, and they give you like the images that you might need to build out the widget. But my subscriber wanted help with this one, where you basically just build a form that has some buttons, some ratings 1 through 5, and then when you submit, it shows a thank you page. So we're going to try to build that, and I'm going to be using React, although you could try to solve this with whatever you want. Let's just go ahead and start with trying to build out this first modal. And I'm not big into design and stuff, so I mean, I'm not going to spend a lot of time like making sure this is all pixel perfect. But I do have a Vite app already set up. I'm just going to go ahead and like remove some of the stuff that we won't need. And we're going to start with a component. I'll make a folder here called like components. And inside its components folder, I'm going to make a new React component, which I guess I'll call rating TSX, right? I'm using TypeScript. So if you're not familiar with TypeScript, hopefully this isn't too over your head, but hopefully it's not too much stuff new that would be too confusing to follow. But so when you make a new TSX file, you have the ability to basically export a function. And this function is going to be basically what builds up your functional React component. So in our case, we're going to create a rating component. And let's just go ahead and return some text that says like hello. I want to make sure that this thing works. And once you've done that, let's try to import it inside of our main app. So I'll just go ahead and say rating like this, auto import that, and go back to the app and it says hello. So we know everything is kind of set up correctly. And now let's move back to the challenge of where we need to basically build out this little widget, a modal. It doesn't really matter what it is. I'm just going to do like a little panel. And let's make it gray. So on the rating component itself, we would probably have to import some CSS. Again, I'm not using Tailwind. I'm not using any type of like, actually we could probably use CSS modules here. So I'm going to say rating.css.module, or it might be called module.css. I don't remember. I think it's rating module CSS. And I want to go ahead and import this. So I'm going to say import styles from rating.module. .css, and I want to make sure that I should be able to actually style this. So inside the ratings module, I'm going to go ahead and make something called panel class. Let's just give this a background color of like gray and make sure this thing shows up. So on here, I'm going to say class name is equal to styles.panel, and that's going to take the styles of that class and apply it to my React component. So now we should potentially have a panel with a gray background that says hello, and it looks pretty good. Now, one thing they do give you is they give you like designs you can use as you're trying to build this out. Let's see if we can actually just like go ahead and use this. Go ahead and put it here. And there's various ways you can try to get colors from like pictures. I like to do is just get the color picker here. And let's go ahead and grab this color. All right, so going back to that, let's just change that to a gray, and we'll make the actual background of the entire body. We'll just make this like black. So I'm going to say body background black. So let's first start with like adding a title that says, how did we do? So going back to React, I'm going to go to the rating component, and let's change this to like an H1 or an H2. How did you do? Now, technically, this should be an H1 because this is the only H1 on the page. But depending on if you already have an H1 on the page, this might need to be an H2 or some other type of heading so that you have accessibility set up correctly. But let's go back to the app and make sure that this thing shows up. How did you do? I'm zoomed in a lot, so let's just zoom out. Looks okay. Although it says, how did we do, not how did you do. Fix that. And then let's add some text here. Please let us know how we did with your support requests. So I'll do a paragraph. Please let us know how we did with your support request, period. And going back, all feedback is appreciated to help us improve our offering. All feedback is appreciated to help us improve our offering. Now they probably give you some text, so I don't have to like type this all up by hand. But I'll just type it out by hand. Appreciated. Spell that wrong. All right, go back to the app. Does this show up? Okay, looks good. They also have 5 components and a submit button. So let's just go ahead and add a button here. A button that says submit. And also, we have the 5 buttons and a star. So maybe we should go back and add the star in. So up here, I'll just add like an image. And I'll say the source is going to be equal to /, and I believe I have a star icon already. I have like an icon star SVG here. I should be able to do that, and the star should show up. Awesome. And then finally, these buttons. How do you add 5 buttons? Well, let's go back to React here, and above the button itself, the submit button, let's just add some buttons. I'll add 5 of them, and it'll say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we're going to style this a little bit better in a second, but let's start with the top and going down, and also take a step back and look at the panel itself. So the panel, it looks like it has maybe, it looks like 20 pixels of padding around it. So I'm going to go back to where we're styling the panel, which is here, and I'll just say padding 20 pixels. Okay, simple enough. And now we have some padding that's around the whole panel. Now also the edges of the panel were rounded. So I'm going to say border, say like 10 pixels. Oh, actually I'll say border radius like 10 pixels and see how that looks. Does that look round enough? It might be a little bit more. It looks like it's more of like a 50, 40 pixels or something. Okay. And again, we're not going for like a perfect one-to-one match with this, but the closer you get, the better. But I think the panel looks pretty good, and as we change the text and stuff, it'll kind of shrink down. We could also give this panel like a... We could also give this panel like a fixed width. So if you look at the width of this, it's about 300. So I'm going to give this a width of 300 pixels, and let's just, you know, let's just make this exact. So I'm going to give this a height of 300 pixels too. Okay. And let's try to get this all to fit on the page and also reduce the text to some stuff. So the star has like some background on it. If you notice, there's like a gray background. Let's just go ahead and figure out what color that is. I'll use my picker here. I'll click on the gray. Like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and on the star itself, I'm going to give this a class name of styles.star. Okay. And I will say star, and I will give this a background of that color. Then probably also a border radius of 100%, so it kind of makes it rounded, perfectly rounded. I don't know if it needs to be 100 or 50, I forget. But then also I'll give it some padding of 10 pixels. Okay, so this should make it look pretty good. We want to make it align to the left, right? So I could potentially, we could basically just make this position relative and make it left 0. We might also just be able to see text align left here, and that'll push everything to the left, which is probably a better approach. When looking at this though, I do think the panel needs more padding. Like I think we should probably give this a lot more padding. I'll double it. Okay. The H1 looks pretty large. So I might reduce the size of the H1 a little bit, which we could go ahead and say last name is styles title. You might ask, why am I using CSS modules and not normal CSS? I usually use Tailwind, but I decided to use Vite to set up a React project, and the first thing I decided to do is just do a module. But it doesn't really matter. You can use CSS and not use modules. Works fine. It's just a little bit more extra overhead to make sure you don't like overwrite existing styles. But yeah, this should be pretty good. How do we do? So this title, I'm just going to give it a font size of 18 pixels and see if that's good. Yeah, that's a little small, so let's bump it up to 24. You can also bump it up to 32. Okay, how's that look? Looks pretty close, I guess. Please let us know how we did with your feedback. Now I do think the color, like if you zoom in a little bit, I think the color of the text is actually a little darker. Let's just go ahead and grab some styles here. That. And I'm gonna go ahead and just say like a description, and I'll give it that color there. And we're gonna go ahead and go back to the rating, and I want to give this a style of description. So I'll say description. So that should make the color gray. Looks a little bit better. Now there's a little less padding between those, I would say. So let's go back to the title here. And I'm going to go ahead and just reduce the, I think it's like margin bottom. I think by default, like H1s have some type of margin on them. Could be wrong. So what you could do is just hover over and see if it's an orange box, it's margin. If it's green, it's padding. Okay, so the margin, again, still looks a little big. So yeah, I'm going to give it margin of 4 instead, and that should kind of move up the text. And to get all the text to fit in here, we could either shrink the text or we could widen the panel a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and just widen it by 40 pixels. Make sure that we can get that support word there. Okay, there we go. That looks good. I did notice that this has an exclamation mark, so let's add that. So let's go back to this and kind of inspect what we have and compare it to what we want. This is what we want. This is what we have. Okay, so we're kind of there. We're kind of zoomed in a little bit more. I'm not sure if what the correct width is we need to be using. So let's focus on the buttons, right? So what are the colors of the buttons? I'm going to go ahead and just get the gray of a inactive button. And we're going to go ahead and just in the ratings module here, I'm going to go ahead and just say like rating like that. Just give it rating. And I'll give it a background of default to that. Okay, so let's add some classes to all this. I'll say class name is styles.rating. And again, we could probably give this some type of rounded, kind of like the star. We could just go ahead and copy that, but I do believe it needs to be a little bit larger. So let's just go, and we're going to give it more padding. Actually, now that I think about it, padding's not going to work. We need to make it probably width of 50 pixels and a height of 50 pixels to keep the aspect ratio proper. Okay, that looks pretty good. And that looks pretty accurate, actually. Now, these buttons all need to be on the same row. One way you can do this is by adding like a div around it and make it like a button group. I'll just add a div right now. And inside of this, I'm going to give this a class name of styles group. Okay, so I'll say group. And then this is going to be display of flex. And then I want to basically make it so that all the buttons are spaced out evenly, right? So how do I do that? Well, you could say justify content, and I could say space between. That should push all the buttons out, so there's some space between them all. But it does look like there's quite a lot of space, right? Compared to the image we're looking at. So I think what we need to do is actually make the panel back to 300. And then for the description itself, maybe we should give this a font size of like 14 pixels to kind of scale it down. I'll do 13. How about that? Okay, that looks better. Yeah, so it looks pretty good. Now there's some hover state when you're hovering over a button. Actually, I can't tell if you're hovering is. Looks like when you hover over a button, it's actually this state. So let's go ahead and say group. Or I'm sorry, we'll go rating hover. And we want the background to become different color, right? So now I should be able to hover over these things and change them. And then when you activate one, when you click one, we should probably also change the background to that orange, which let's figure out what color that is. Like that. So I'll say rating active. Then I want to say background is the orange. Actually, I think you can call it focus. Maybe that's probably a better approach to do it. So when you actually focus on these things, we'll make them orange. Okay. Now, I think it's fine to keep that blue outline because that actually helps us with accessibility. That's built into the browser. So although the styling doesn't have that outline, I would probably keep that on. And then let's make the button, a submit button, let's make it full width. And then also add some space between this. So you could potentially, on the rating itself, or I'm sorry, on the group itself, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move the group up so that I know the group comes first, and then nested inside the group is the ratings. You could use Sass, which would make this a little bit easier to understand, in my opinion. But I think this will work. But I'm going to give some margin bottom to the group. You could also use Flexbox and like add some gap in between all these things, but I don't really want to mess up the spacing that I styled for these. So I think margin's okay. And I probably need to add more margin. I'll double that. Okay. Now for the button, we want the button. So I'll just go ahead and say like submit. We want this submit button. I go here and say class name is equal to styles submit. We want this to be width of 100%. We want the background to be white. And for right now, I'll say padding 20 pixels and see how this looks. Okay, so this looks pretty bad. For right now, what we're going to do is we're going to change the color of the text inside this to be that orange. Cool. And I think the border radius, I'll say border radius. Let's just give that like 20 pixels and see what happens. The border radius has to be matching to like almost the height of the container. So whatever the height is, which I think mine's a little bit too large, so I'm going to reduce the padding to 10. And that looks a little bit, that looks pretty accurate, right? Now, I don't know what they want the styling to be when you hover over it. Let's see. Okay, I guess when you click it, it turns white. When it's there, it's just a yellow thing. So I need to also, I'm going to make this focus. We're going to make this orange. Actually, no, we're going to make it white. When you focus it, I'll say white. Wait, what am I doing? The color of the text is white. The background is orange. So I'll say background like that. And then color will be white. But when you focus it, we want to change the background to white. And then we want to swap the color with that orange. Now you could use CSS variables for some of these colors, which might be a lot easier to manage. I'm just going to keep it sloppy for right now because this is like a newbie challenge. If you actually look at the challenge, it says newbie. So again, like if you're a beginner and you want to get practice, then I would do this challenge. But that's what we have. The hover state needs to change, I think. Like I would rather this be on hover like that. So we are using React. So what I want to do is when you actually select these things, I want to keep track of what thing you've clicked, like what rating you've clicked. So we're going to go back to the actual component and we're going to try to add in a little bit of state management here. So if you're a beginner at React, this will be some good practice with state. I want to add a selected rating, set selected rating. And I'm going to make this default to undefined, but this will be a number for right now. Okay, make sure you auto import that. And what we're going to do is we're going to use, no, one thing I haven't actually figured out how to do is how do you add active? So I think what I'm going to have to do is when you select on one of these, I'm just going to go ahead and say like on click. And we're going to say handle rating clicked. This could be a function that takes in a number. So I'm going to do an anonymous function here, and I'm going to go ahead and just print out 1. And up here, I'm going to go ahead and just say function handle rating clicked, which takes in a rating, which is going to be a number. And then we're going to go ahead and say set selected rating of number. I guess this would be rating, wouldn't it? And so one thing you'll notice is that this code is kind of repetitive. We have this thing 5 times. You could potentially make this cleaner by doing an array of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do a map. And we're going to go ahead and just say this is rating, and we're going to put that button in here. So I'm going to take this button, pull it up. I'm going to delete all this. Okay, and this could be our rating. So now the code is more generic, and these will be dynamically generated. So if we ever decide that we want to go to a 6-star rating, we could just add that in and boom, we got the 6. 7, 8, 9. Goes off the page. So obviously let's just focus on what we're trying to do here. And we should probably also pass in rating there. So what are we trying to do? When you click on the rating, we're going to basically update state and keep track of that. So I want to go ahead and make sure, I'm just going to print out the selected rating somewhere. So as I click it, you'll notice that there's a 1, 2, 3 that basically gets rendered out to the page. Pretty cool. And I'm just doing that to verify that, hey, are we updating state the way we should be? And it seems like it's working good. Okay, so when we select the rating, I'm also going to disable this. So if there is no rating, so if rating is equal to undefined, I'm going to disable the button down below. Let me call it selected rating. So if you haven't selected any of these, you can't actually submit. Okay. Now it actually lets you submit. Now let's just try to like, the other part of the challenge is building out like another panel that does more stuff, that shows more stuff. It has this stuff. We could try to do that. So when you submit, we're going to keep track of if the user submitted, and then we'll show a completely different panel. So I'm going to try to keep this all in one component, but at some point you might want to split this out into two components. You have a rating component, and then you have a thank you component, and then your app would actually toggle between them depending on if you submitted or not. But I'm just going to go ahead and just keep this as one component because I think it's easier to understand for beginners. I'm going to keep track of if we've actually submitted. So is set is submitted and set is submitted is a use state. And that's going to be a Boolean that's set to false. But when you actually submit this form or click the button, actually, I'm going to change this div. I'm going to change that to a form to make it more kind of proper, like that. And I'm going to go ahead and just say on submit. Actually, I'm going to change these buttons to type button so it doesn't like auto submit when you click these. Okay. But on the form itself, I'm going to say on submit. And what we're going to do is we're just simply going to call set is submitted to true. That's it. But we should probably make this proper code. So I'm going to go ahead and say like handle form submitted. It's going to be a function that's going to say, this will probably take an E. I'll say react.form event, and then I'll say e.prevent default. And then I want to go ahead and just pull in this code like that. And I want to go ahead and make sure I call that function we just set up. So now when you submit the form, hopefully we can use that Boolean to show this new panel. So let's just go ahead and click 3 and click submit. And you should also be able to press enter on this and have it submit, but I'm not sure yet. So we want to kind of hide this form, or at least hide the contents of this form if we haven't already submitted, or if we have already submitted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say curly braces. Actually, technically I could just say this, return is submitted, and then we're going to do a ternary. And if you have submitted, we're going to render out a div, which we're going to style in a little bit. Otherwise, we're going to render out a form. I'll just go ahead and do this, render out the form. And I'll just put like a thank you in here. This. There you go. Now we need it to look like this. Okay, so we can use some of the same styling, but inside the form itself, we need a picture of this little calculator thing. I guess it's this one. Let's just go ahead and grab that. And we want to put an image here for that SVG. Okay, and make sure that that thing shows up. It does. Now I'm also going to give the same class name to this because it's like the same styling. It's like a panel. I'll just give it the same class name. Okay, that looks pretty good. But there is a difference. Everything is centered. Like on this panel, everything is center aligned versus left aligned. So it's actually kind of a different panel. I'll go ahead and say thank you panel like this. And we can go back to our CSS module, and I'm going to go ahead and just say thank you model or thank you panel. I'm going to do a lot of the same stuff, but I'm going to text align the center. In fact, now that I think about this, I'm going to add a little helper utility class here called text center, and we are going to just append text center to it. So I think this will work. If I keep this as panel, and that should center the image. So let's go back and make sure this works. Not centering. Text center, text align center. I think I might have called it something, text align center. So what I'm gonna do instead of text center, I'm just gonna say center, and then I'm gonna give this a display of flex. And then I'm gonna say flex direction column. And then I'm gonna say items align items of center. I think that would actually be a better approach. So I could simply just do this. And will that actually work? I don't think so. I need to go and refresh my memory on how like CSS modules work. You might not be able to do what I'm doing here. So if I just put this here, instead of in the actual like CSS module, I should be able to like use it, I think. Okay, that worked. I need to go refresh my memory. I honestly don't work with CSS modules. So there's probably a way to like combine classes together or something. So now we just need to say thank you, and then we appreciate your feedback, whatever. We can kind of reuse the stylings that we had here. So I'll just go ahead and grab those two. And I'm going to go ahead and just say thank you with an exclamation mark. And then we appreciate you taking the time to give a rating. We appreciate you giving the time to leave us a rating. I don't think that's what that said, but I think it should be okay. What did it say? We appreciate you taking the time to give a rating. We appreciate you taking the time to give a rating. If you ever need support, what happened to it? I'm not sure what happened to my design. It literally like went away. Refresh the page and go back. If you ever need more support, don't hesitate to get in touch. If you ever need more support, don't hesitate to get in touch. All right, so again, this text, we should probably center it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give text center here as well. So text align could be center. And I'm sorry, I'm putting it on the wrong, I'm going too fast. Let me slow down. I'm going to put this here on that center class. That should hopefully center our text. Did not though. Why did it not center my text? This has a class of center on it. Because text align is center, but it's getting overloaded by this text align left. Let me actually Google it. CSS modules combine classes. It looks like you should just be able to do this. So I think there's an issue with this panel thing is the one declared first. Maybe. I might need to get rid of the text align left here and just say like text left. I will say that CSS is like my biggest weakness. Although I'm pretty good at it, like I can get some stuff looking the way it needs to look, but I don't always do stuff the most proper way. So I think I'm going to go back and I'm going to give this panel a left so that it looks normal and it doesn't overwrite with the other styling. So it looks, oh, that messed it up though. All right, so when in doubt, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make two panels. I'm just going to have to copy some styles. It's fine. This will be text align of left, and this will be text align center. This will be a thank you panel, and this will just be panel. All right, so I'm going to change up my approach here, and this will be panel, which should have the text align, and this will be my thank you panel, which I think you have to use camel case here. This is one thing I don't like about CSS modules, the fact that I named it this, but then like I think I have to use it like this. It's kind of weird. Maybe that's not how you do it. Maybe you actually have to say thank you panel like this. Okay, that's how you do it. Now let's go ahead and just you selected 4 out of 5. We have to display what they selected, which I think you can just put up here as like another paragraph, and it could say class name of like styles. Oops, styles selected. Okay, you selected, and then we can interpolate the selected rating up here out of 5. Does that make sense? You selected 3 out of 5. Now we just need to make the background of that rounded a little bit. I'll go to the CSS module, and I'm going to go ahead and just put it here, and I'll say text is, the color will be like that orange, which we've kind of copied many places, but I'm just going to put it here. And then also we can give this some border radius and some padding and some background. Go ahead and grab this stuff. Let's see what happens when we do this. So I think the color that we need to use is more of a lighter gray. So we can kind of just add 1 to all this, and that should kind of lighten it up a little bit. And that looks pretty good. I think the padding's a little much. Let's just do 5. Selected 3 out of 5. The font size, maybe 12 might be a better font size. And then the width. The width is a little bit too big. I think it's because I'm using a paragraph, and I should probably give this a display of inline block to make it not. Yeah, let's do that. And then I'll say padding left 10 pixels, padding right 10 pixels. It looks pretty bad. I'll do 20 pixels. There we go. And yeah, I think that should be okay. I can't think of any reason why that wouldn't work. All right. I think that's about it. I mean, it took me like 30-some minutes to do that. I'm sure someone could knock that out much faster than me and probably do it a lot more cleaner. There's things that like, there's some CSS variables. I forget how to do it. It's in like the root. And I could potentially make a variable called like primary. And then I could put that orange there if I wanted to. Just so that I'm not like copying that orange everywhere. And then I could say like var primary like this. That's probably a cleaner way. So everywhere I'm using that same color orange, which I've used like 4 places now, I could actually instead just use a CSS variable, which would probably make it a lot cleaner in terms of code. Although I think I screwed it up. I don't know if the root thing has to be, oh, is it just 1? Maybe I need to put this on the main app or index CSS. Oh, there's already a root here. Yeah, so technically I could just say primary color like that. And it's just 1 hyphen. My lack of CSS knowledge is showing through, but this is how you do it. This is not how you do it, I guess. CSS variable with CSS module. So inside your main CSS, you do color, then you import it, var CSS. Okay. Interesting. Let's try that. I'm going to make I never done this before, say var CSS, and we're going to put that color there. I'm just going to go ahead and just say primary. You learn something new every day. Let's just go ahead and put that there. And then I'm going to go ahead and make sure I do import thing from var CSS. I need to go up a level, I believe. And then I should be able to use it by saying var primary. Is this going to work? Let's go back to our app. Cool, that actually works. So all that just so that we don't have that like orange, and you could do the same thing for the other colors as well, just so you don't have like stuff copied everywhere. But yeah, that's how I would build out that modal. Again, this isn't 100% perfect, but I think it looks pretty accurate to what we were supposed to be building. If you guys enjoyed watching this, be sure to give me a thumbs up, subscribe, press the bell icon. You guys can call me out on anything that I did that seems incorrect. But again, this was like a newbie challenge, so I think it was good practice anyway. Also, feel free to join my Discord if you want to talk to me directly or just find a place to ask questions if you're ever stuck on coding in general. Have a good day and happy coding.